Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of EV Revolution Roundup. I'm your host, Alex, joined by my fantastic co-hosts, Sarah and Mike. Today, we've got a jam-packed show full of the latest and greatest in the world of electric vehicles. We're also thrilled to have a special guest with us, Dr. Emma Chen, an automotive industry analyst who will be providing some expert insights throughout our discussion. How's everyone doing today?
Great to be here, Alex. I'm excited to dive into all the EV news we've got lined up.
Ready and raring to go, as always. Though I must say, I'm a bit skeptical about some of the developments we'll be discussing today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Fantastic. Let's jump right in with our first topic. On September 27th, 2024, Electrek reported that a new camouflaged Tesla prototype was spotted being tested on California streets. This could potentially be Tesla's upcoming cheaper EV model, possibly even the long-rumored $25,000 compact car. What are your initial thoughts on this, Sarah?
Well, Alex, this is incredibly exciting news. If Tesla can truly deliver a $25,000 electric vehicle, it could be a game changer for EV adoption rates. The lower price point would make electric vehicles accessible to a much broader range of consumers, potentially accelerating the transition away from fossil fuel-powered cars.
Hold on a second, Sarah. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've heard promises of cheaper Tesla models before, and they haven't always materialized as quickly as expected. Remember the Model 3 rollout?
Fair point, Mike. But let's dig a bit deeper into what we know. The prototype was heavily camouflaged, making it difficult to discern details. However, we do know that Tesla has been working on a new EV platform to enable lower-cost vehicles. Dr. Chen, what's your take on this from an industry perspective?
It's certainly an interesting development, Alex. Tesla has been talking about a more affordable model for years, and it seems they're finally making concrete steps towards that goal. The key challenge for Tesla will be maintaining their profit margins while significantly reducing the price point. They'll need to innovate in both design and manufacturing processes to make this work.
That's a great point, Dr. Chen. Do you think this move by Tesla will push other manufacturers to accelerate their plans for more affordable EVs?
Absolutely, Sarah. The EV market is becoming increasingly competitive. And if Tesla can successfully launch a $25,000 model, it will put significant pressure on other automakers to follow suit. We might see a race to the bottom in terms of pricing, which could be great for consumers, but challenging for manufacturers.
I'm still not convinced. Even if Tesla can produce this cheaper model, will it have the range and features that consumers expect from a Tesla? There's always a trade-off between cost and performance.
Those are all valid points. It'll be interesting to see how this develops. Now, let's move on to our next topic. On the same day, September 27th, Electrek also reported that Kia held an opening ceremony for its first electric vehicle-only manufacturing plant called EVO. This is a significant step for Kia, isn't it, Sarah?
Absolutely, Alex. This new plant, located in Hwaseong, South Korea, is a clear indication of Kia's commitment to the electric vehicle market. The fact that it's dedicated solely to EV production speaks volumes about where they see the future of the automotive industry heading.
I have to admit, even I'm impressed by this move. Dedicating an entire plant to EVs is a bold statement.
Indeed it is. The plant will focus on producing Kia's new low-cost EV3 and EV4 models and has a capacity to build 150,000 EVs annually. Dr. Chen, how significant is this development in the broader context of the automotive industry?
This is a major milestone, not just for Kia, but for the EV industry as a whole. We're seeing a shift from traditional automakers treating EVs as a side project to making them a central part of their business strategy. The EVO plant, which stands for evolution, symbolizes this transition. It's also worth noting that focusing on low-cost models could help Kia capture a significant market share in the growing affordable EV segment.
That's fascinating, Dr. Chen. Do you think this move by Kia will influence other manufacturers to create dedicated EV plants as well?
It's highly likely, Sarah. As demand for EVs continues to grow, we'll probably see more manufacturers following Kia's lead. Dedicated EV plants allow for more efficient production processes tailored specifically to electric vehicles, which can lead to cost savings and potentially lower prices for consumers.
But let's not forget the potential downsides. What about the workers in traditional auto plants? Won't this shift to EV-only production potentially lead to job losses in other areas of the automotive industry?
That's a valid concern, Mike. However, it's important to note that the transition to EVs also creates new job opportunities. Workers can be retrained to work in EV production, and there's potential for growth in related industries like battery production and charging infrastructure.
Excellent points all around. It's clear that Kia's new EVO plant represents a significant step forward in the EV industry. Now, let's move on to our next topic, which is quite different but equally exciting. On September 27th, Electrek reported that Thor Industries revealed an electric RV concept called eStream. This is a pretty innovative idea, isn't it?
Absolutely, Alex. The idea of an electric RV is fascinating. It really shows how the EV revolution is spreading to all types of vehicles, not just passenger cars.
I have to say, I'm intrigued by this one, but I'm also skeptical about the practicality. RVs are known for covering long distances, and range anxiety is already an issue for many EV owners.
Well, let's look at the details. The eStream concept features a 140 kW battery pack and has a claimed range of 500 miles. That's pretty impressive for an RV, isn't it?
Indeed it is, Alex. The 500-mile range is quite remarkable, especially considering the size and weight of an RV. However, it's important to note that this is still a concept, and real-world performance may vary.
One of the most interesting aspects of the eStream is that it's designed to be towed behind an electric vehicle and uses its own electric motors to assist with propulsion while being towed. That's a clever way to extend the range of the towing vehicle, isn't it?
Absolutely, Sarah. It's an innovative approach to addressing the range concerns that Mike mentioned. By having its own motors, the eStream can potentially reduce the load on the towing vehicle, helping to preserve its range.
I'll admit that is a clever solution, but I'm curious about the practicality. How much does this thing weigh? And what happens if both the towing vehicle and the RV run out of charge in the middle of nowhere?
Those are valid concerns, Mike. The weight of the eStream hasn't been disclosed yet, but it's likely to be substantial given the size of the battery pack. As for charging, this concept highlights the need for a more robust charging infrastructure, especially in rural areas and along popular RV routes.
That's a great point, Dr. Chen. The development of electric RVs like the eStream could actually drive the expansion of charging infrastructure in areas that might otherwise be overlooked.
Absolutely. It's clear that the eStream concept represents an exciting potential future for RV travel. It'll be interesting to see how this concept develops and whether it makes it to production.
Well, Alex, the results are interesting, to say the least. The test, conducted by a beta tester using FSD version 12.5, showed that the system requires intervention on average every 13 miles.
Every 13 miles? That doesn't sound very self-driving to me.
Exactly, Sarah. While it's an improvement over previous versions, which required intervention every 8 miles, it's still far from what most people would consider fully autonomous driving.
Dr. Chen, from an industry perspective, how significant is this improvement? And where does it place Tesla in the race towards true autonomous driving?
It's certainly an improvement, Alex, but as Mike and Sarah pointed out, it's still a long way from true autonomy. The Society of Automotive Engineers defines 6 levels of driving automation, from 0 fully manual to 5 fully autonomous. Tesla's current system, despite its name, is still considered level 2, which means it can control steering and acceleration in some situations, but requires constant supervision from the driver.
That's interesting, Dr. Chen. So despite the name, full self-driving, it's not actually fully self-driving at all.
That's correct, Sarah. The name has been a point of controversy and has led to some confusion among consumers. Several consumer advocacy groups have called for Tesla to change the name to more accurately reflect the system's capabilities.
I've been saying this for years. The term full self-driving is misleading and potentially dangerous if it leads people to overestimate the system's capabilities.
Those are all excellent points. It's clear that while progress is being made in autonomous driving technology, we're still a long way from truly self-driving cars. Now, let's move on to our next topic, which is about EV pricing strategies. On September 26th, Electrek reported that Hyundai is offering significant discounts and incentives on their electric vehicles. Sarah, can you break this down for us?
Certainly, Alex. Hyundai is offering a $7,500 incentive on their 2024 Ioniq 5 and Ioniq 6 models. On top of that, some dealers are offering additional discounts of $2,000 to $3,000 to $3,000 to $3,000 to $3,000 on a new Hyundai EV.
That's a substantial discount. But why is Hyundai doing this? Are they having trouble selling their EVs?
It's not necessarily about trouble selling EVs, Mike. This aggressive pricing strategy is likely aimed at boosting EV sales volumes. The EV market is becoming increasingly competitive, and Hyundai is positioning itself to capture a larger market share.
That makes sense, Dr. Chen. And from an environmental perspective, anything that makes EVs more affordable and accessible is a positive development. These discounts could really help accelerate EV adoption.
Absolutely, Sarah. And it's not just about the environmental benefits. EVs often have lower operating costs than traditional vehicles, so these discounts could lead to significant long-term savings for consumers.
I see your point, but I'm wondering about the impact on Hyundai's bottom line. Can they sustain these kinds of discounts?
That's a great question, Mike. In the short term, these discounts will likely impact Hyundai's profit margins on their EV models. However, the strategy here is likely focused on long-term market position. By boosting sales volumes now, Hyundai can achieve economies of scale in production, potentially lowering costs in the future. They're also building brand loyalty in the EV market, which could pay off as the market continues to grow.
It's also worth noting that these discounts make Hyundai's EVs more competitive with traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. This could help persuade more consumers to make the switch to electric.
Excellent points all around. It's clear that Hyundai's pricing strategy could have significant implications for the EV market. Now, let's move on to our final topic for today. Electrek reported on September 26th that California is making changes to improve electric vehicle adoption. Sarah, I know this is right up your alley. What can you tell us about these developments?
Well, Alex, while the details weren't fully specified in the report, we know that California has been at the forefront of EV adoption in the United States. The state has set aggressive EV adoption targets and has been implementing various policies to encourage the transition to electric vehicles.
But what exactly are these new changes? The report seems pretty vague.
You're right, Mike. The details are a bit sparse. However, based on California's past initiatives, we can speculate that these changes might include new incentives for EV purchases, investments in charging infrastructure, or perhaps new regulations to encourage EV adoption.
If I may add, California's actions in this area are particularly significant because of the state's influence on the broader U.S. auto market. Many other states follow California's lead when it comes to vehicle emission standards and EV policies.
That's a great point, Dr. Chen. Can you elaborate on why California has such a big influence?
Certainly, Alex. California is the largest auto market in the U.S., and it has a unique authority under the Clean Air Act to set its own vehicle emission standards. Other states can choose to follow either the federal standards or California's stricter standards. As of now, about a dozen states follow California's lead, representing a significant portion of the U.S. auto market.
That's fascinating, Dr. Chen. So when California makes changes to improve EV adoption, it could potentially have ripple effects across the country.
Absolutely, Sarah. That's why automakers and industry analysts pay such close attention to California's policies in this area.
I can see why this is significant, but I'm still concerned about the lack of specifics in this report. Aren't we just speculating at this point?
You're right to be cautious, Mike. We should be clear that we don't have all the details yet. However, given California's history of leadership in this area, it's worth keeping a close eye on these developments.
Absolutely, Alex. And regardless of the specifics, the fact that California is continuing to push for improved EV adoption is a positive sign for the industry and for our efforts to combat climate change.
Well said, Sarah. As we wrap up our discussion, I'd like to ask each of you to share your key takeaway from today's news. Dr. Chen, let's start with you.
From my perspective, the key takeaway is the acceleration we're seeing in the EV market. From Tesla's potential $25,000 car to Kia's dedicated EV plant, to Hyundai's aggressive pricing strategy, we're seeing major moves from automakers to capture market share in the growing EV sector. This competition is likely to drive innovation and potentially lower prices for consumers, which could significantly accelerate EV adoption.
I agree, Dr. Chen. My takeaway is the potential for increased accessibility of EVs. Whether it's through more affordable models, expanded production capacity, or pricing incentives, these developments could make EVs a viable option for a much broader range of consumers. And with California continuing to push for improved adoption, we could see even more supportive policies and infrastructure development.
While I remain skeptical about some of the claims and timelines we've discussed today, I have to admit that the momentum in the EV market is undeniable. My takeaway is that we're at a critical juncture in the transition to electric vehicles. The next few years will be crucial in determining how quickly and successfully this transition occurs.
Those are all excellent points. My takeaway is the breadth of innovation we're seeing in the EV space. From potentially more affordable Tesla models to electric RVs and ongoing developments in autonomous driving technology, it's clear that the EV revolution is touching all aspects of the automotive industry.
That's an excellent question, Alex. Traditional automakers are definitely feeling the pressure to adapt. We're seeing many of them, like Kia with their Evio plant, making significant investments in EV technology and production. However, it's not just about producing EVs. These companies are also having to rethink their entire business models, from supply chains to dealership networks. It's a challenging transition, but those who adapt successfully could emerge as leaders in the new automotive landscape.
That's fascinating, Dr. Chen. I'm curious about the environmental impact of this transition. While EVs are cleaner to operate, there are concerns about the environmental costs of battery production and disposal. How is the industry addressing these issues?
You're right to bring that up, Sarah. The industry is increasingly focused on the entire life cycle of EVs, from production to disposal. We're seeing advancements in battery technology that aim to reduce the use of rare earth metals and improve recyclability. There's also a growing emphasis on developing a circular economy for EV batteries, where they can be repurposed for energy storage after their automotive life is over.
That's all well and good, but I'm more concerned about the practical aspects for consumers. How is the charging infrastructure keeping up with the growing number of EVs on the road?
That's a crucial point, Mike. The development of charging infrastructure is indeed a critical factor in EV adoption. Sarah, can you give us an overview of the current state of charging infrastructure and what's being done to improve it?
Certainly, Alex. The charging infrastructure has been expanding rapidly, but it's still a work in progress. In urban areas, we're seeing a proliferation of public charging stations, and many workplaces are installing chargers for employees. However, there are still challenges, particularly for long-distance travel and in rural areas. Many governments and private companies are investing heavily in expanding the charging network. For example, the U.S. government has allocated billions of dollars for charging infrastructure as part of recent legislation.
That's encouraging to hear. Now, let's zoom out a bit and consider the global perspective. Dr. Chen, how does the EV market in the United States compare to other major markets like Europe and China?
The global EV market is quite diverse, Alex. Europe has been leading in terms of EV adoption rates, driven by strong government incentives and regulations. China is the largest EV market in terms of volume, with a robust domestic EV industry and significant government support. The US has been somewhat behind these markets, but we're seeing accelerating adoption, particularly in states like California. Each market has its unique characteristics, but the overall trend towards electrification is global.
That's interesting, Dr. Chen. Are there any lessons the US could learn from these other markets?
Absolutely, Sarah. One key lesson is the importance of consistent and long-term policy support. Countries that have maintained strong incentives and clear regulatory frameworks have generally seen faster EV adoption. Another lesson is the value of investing in charging infrastructure alongside vehicle incentives. It's also worth noting the role of affordable EV models in driving mass adoption, which we're starting to see more of in the US market.
All of this sounds great in theory, but I'm wondering about the practical challenges. What about people who live in apartments or don't have access to home charging? How are we addressing these issues?
That's a crucial point, Mike. This is definitely a challenge, especially in urban areas. Some cities are experimenting with curbside charging stations, and there's growing interest in workplace charging. We're also seeing innovative solutions like charging stations integrated into street lamps. However, it's clear that more work needs to be done in this area to ensure equitable access to EV charging.
These are all excellent points. It's clear that while we're making significant progress in the transition to electric vehicles, there are still many challenges to overcome. As we wrap up, I'd like to ask each of you to share your thoughts on what you think will be the most significant development in the EV space over the next year.
In my view, the most significant development will likely be in battery technology. We're on the cusp of some major breakthroughs in solid-state batteries, which could dramatically improve range and charging times. If these technologies can be successfully commercialized, it could be a game changer for the industry.
I think we'll see a major push in policy and infrastructure development. With growing concerns about climate change, I expect we'll see more aggressive targets for EV adoption and significant investments in charging infrastructure, both in the U.S. and globally.
While I'm still skeptical about some aspects, I think we'll see a breakthrough in autonomous driving technology. Whether it's from Tesla or another company, I believe we'll see significant progress towards true self-driving capabilities.
Those are all fascinating predictions. For my part, I think we'll see a proliferation of affordable EV models, which could really drive mass adoption. It's an exciting time for the industry, and I can't wait to see how these developments unfold.
Thanks, Alex. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in.
Always a pleasure, Alex. Looking forward to seeing how these stories develop.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fascinating discussion.
Before we go, let's take a quick listener question. This one comes from John in Seattle. He asks, with all these developments in EVs, what do you think the auto industry will look like in 10 years?
That's a great question, John. I believe we'll see a much higher percentage of EVs on the road, possibly even a majority in some areas. We'll likely have a much more extensive charging infrastructure, and EVs will probably have longer ranges and faster charging times.
I agree that we'll see more EVs, but I think traditional vehicles will still play a significant role, especially in areas with less developed infrastructure. I also think we'll see more hybrid technologies as a bridge between fully electric and traditional vehicles.
From an industry perspective, I expect we'll see a significantly altered automotive landscape. Traditional automakers will have either successfully transitioned to EV production or will be struggling to remain relevant. We'll likely see new players who have successfully entered the market, particularly from the tech sector. The supply chain will look very different, with a greater emphasis on battery production and electronics.
Those are all fascinating predictions. It's clear that the auto industry is in for some major changes in the coming years. And that's all we have time for today. Join us next week when we'll be discussing the latest developments in solid-state battery technology and its potential impact on the EV market. Until then, keep on driving towards a cleaner, electric future.